Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. This will be Part 7, Chapter 7, entitled The Response and Some Revelations. Shouta took a moment to sit in his office, forehead resting in his hands as a headache pounded its way through his skull. This was one of the longest days he's had in a long time, and he's sure that it's only going to turn into a long week. 2 chimes on his phone alert him to emails from Nezu, the first being a message to inform only the necessary parties of Bakugo and Monema's transfers. The second, sent just to Shouta, being the confirmation of his meeting with Midoriya's mother tomorrow. Great. While his email is still open, he quickly types a message to the Bakugos to ask them to meet at UA after school tomorrow and, strangely, gets an almost immediate agreement. He clicks his phone off and shuts his eyes, rubbing circles on his temples, when his door slams open. "Shouta!" The man in question just sent his friend a glare, getting him to speak quieter. "I just passed Bakugo in the hall, coming from this way. He looked pretty upset." Shouta sighs and sits up with some difficulty to face Hizashi. "Yeah, we had a pretty tough conversation." The blonde tilts his head. "About what? Does it have to do with what you've been looking into about Midoriya?" Shouta nods. "Have you seen the email?" Hizashi raises an eyebrow at the seeming change in conversation, but takes out his phone nonetheless. He taps for a moment before his eyebrows shoot up further. "Bakugo is moving out of your class," he whispers shouts, something Shouta has come to recognize as an expression of genuine surprise. "Yeah." Hizashi's brows furrow. "Why?" After a moment, his face contorts into a somewhat horrified expression as he realizes the implications. "They knew each other, while Midoriya was thought to be quirkless." "Uh-huh. He was a bully, wasn't he?" "Unfortunately." The blonde's face falls. "I can't believe we misread the relationship so bad. We're supposed to be heroes." He makes a frustrated noise. "All the signs were there, but we didn't do anything." His volume was increasing with his rising anger. "I know. I'm mad at myself, too. But we're doing something now. That's why Bakugo is moving classes. It's part of his consequences. Plus, it'll be good for Midoriya to not have to see him every day." Hizashi huffs, but nods in agreement. "Yeah." Their conversation lulls into a comfortable silence for a moment before Shouta speaks up again, standing and stretching his arms up as he does. "I should head home. Maybe I can get more than 5 hours of sleep for the day I'm planning to have tomorrow." His friend snorts and stands as well. They both begin their walk out of the building. "Sure. What's going on tomorrow?" Shouta groans. "Parent meetings." Tuesday rolled around with little fuss. Shouta managed to get a hearty 6 hours of sleep, so he feels somewhat rested. Walking into his classroom is somewhat strange, however, since Bakugo is usually one of the first to arrive. Today it's just Ida sitting at his desk when Shouta gets there. The students slowly trickle in, Shouta waiting at his podium for once. Monema had been instructed to go to Nezu's office when he arrived at school. He was told that he was transferring because of a bullying incident, but nothing more. So that everyone in Class 1A would be present before he joins their class. So Shouta is waiting for class to start to answer questions that he's sure will pop up as their new classmate appears. And Bakugo's disappearance. He can't go into detail, since that would be unfair to Midoriya, but they will need somewhat of an answer. Speaking of, the Greenette has just arrived. He walks into the room as he normally does, the only exception being the eye contact he makes with Shouta, and the accompanying little wave of greeting he gives before plopping into his seat. Shouta smiles fondly at the show of trust, before quickly wiping the expression off his face before too many students saw. He has a reputation, after all. Todoroki, from his place at the back of the class, is the only one who seems to notice the little interaction, eyes flitting between them for just a moment before widening slightly into a face that screams, "I just had an epiphany." Shouta simply raises an eyebrow when he catches his students' glances, causing the boy to shift his focus elsewhere. That kid is a strange one. At this point, almost everyone has arrived and are chatting in groups around the room. Uraraka and Midoriya are talking animatedly at his desk, but Shouta notices his students' green eyes shift to the seat in front of him every once in a while. Bakugo's old seat. Though Shouta can't tell if he's worried, or relieved, or just confused. The bell sounds moments later, a few students slipping into their seats barely on time. Shouta simply gives them a deadpan stare, as they avoid his gaze, the the rest of the class settling into their seats. Straight to the point, he begins class. Good morning. Pay attention, I have an important announcement to make. Ida almost immediately raises his hand and stands simultaneously. Sensei, shouldn't we wait for Bakugo to arrive if it's important? Shouta sighs. Now for the hard part. No, Bakugo will not be coming. An almost automatic outcry can be heard from much of the class. Midoriya looks horrified. Is he okay? Kirishima asked, with worry creasing his brow, overlapping another student's. Did he get caught in a villain attack or something? Shouta raised a hand before they worked themselves up. No, he's fine. He's uninjured. He was interrupted with an upheaval of questions. Then where is he? Yeah, he never misses class. He flared his quirk at them in frustration, causing them all to quiet down a bit. If you will let me finish, I'll tell you. They all shut up. Shouta steeled himself for his next sentence. Bakugo was no longer a part of this class. He heard the noise ramp up again, but didn't give the chance for any questions to be asked before he continued, looking at Midoriya's rapidly widening eyes. He has been transferred to 1B. You do not need to know why. Shouta tuned out the confused murmuring of the class to focus on the greenette, emotions flickering like waves across his face. He didn't see any animosity, which was good. He didn't need to betray the new trust his student had in him via Bakugo's consequences of all things. It was mostly confusion, a bit of worry, and nervous contentment, like he wasn't sure if he should be glad or not. Midoriya looked up to meet Shota's eyes and tilted his head slightly, to which the pro softened his gaze before looking away. Almost perfectly timed, and knowing Nezu it probably was, there was a sharp knock on the door. Still ignoring his students' clamoring, he strode across the room and opened the door to reveal Monoma, obviously nervous but plastering a self-satisfied grin on his face. Shouta rolled his eyes and beckoned him in, speaking over his students once again. You all know Monoma. From today on, he'll be a part of Class 1A. Be nice. A tittering laugh rolled out of Monoma's throat at the introduction. Ah, the ever-prestigious Class 1A. I guess you aren't as good as you think you are, if anyone can just be removed from your class on a whim. Hey, Mina exclaimed. You're in this class now, too. But I was transferred in. It's obvious I'm superior. He let out another mildly obnoxious laugh. There was a lot of grumbling at that, but Shouta just rolled his eyes again. He would need to work on toning down the attitude. Sit down, Monoma. He jerked his thumb towards the empty spot in front of Midoriya. Your desk is over there. The blonde exaggerated a sigh at Midoriya's smile and small wave, shuffling over and plopping into the seat. Hopefully Midoriya's seemingly endless kindness and patience can break through Monoma's self-entitled shell. He just knows the greenette will try to befriend him. He sweeps his eyes across the classroom, seeing many apprehensive glances at Monoma and confusion on many others. Shouta sighed once more. All right, class. Now that that's out of the way, today will be... Eiichiro wasn't sure what to make of this situation. His best friend, who would never admit it, but he was sure he felt the same way, had been transferred out of his class. And Eiichiro didn't have a clue why. It's not like Bakugo did anything that could have caused this, not that he knew of anyway. It's not really like the blonde to break rules. Sure, he had a somewhat atrocious temper and wasn't all that agreeable, but he was determined and passionate, which was super manly. If Eiichiro was honest, he probably looked up to him for that, seeing how he never let anything get to him, unlike Eiichiro himself. He was getting a bit off topic. So Bakugo was transferred. Eiichiro couldn't figure out why, and Aizawa-sensei didn't give them any answers. In fact, it looked like his teacher was completely ignoring their questions. He also noticed a few strange looks Midoriya, of all people, got from sensei. Eiichiro may not be super smart, but he wasn't dumb. Something was going on with his friends, and he was going to figure it out. He figured asking Bakugo would be the easiest thing to do, that is, if he could find him, since his text went unread. Lunch rolled around without incident, besides the almost suppressing discontent radiating from his class at this morning's news, but Bakugo never showed up. Eiichiro usually sat with him, along with Ashido, Kaminari, and Sero, but he was nowhere to be found. So, what do you guys think the deal with Blasty is? Ashido slides into her seat, dropping a tray in front of her. Think he got in trouble? Kaminari asked, shoveling food in his mouth. We all know he has a horrible temper. Eiichiro sighed dejectedly. I don't know, guys. I was going to ask him, but he's not here today. Eiichiro looked out across the cafeteria as his friends continued to theorize. He saw a familiar head of green hair gesturing sporadically to, Monoma, who just scoffed and walked away. Eiichiro stood suddenly, startling his table mates. "I'm gonna ask Mito, bro." He started his walk towards him, ignoring Ashido and Kaminari's questions. He caught up before Midoriya had made it back to his table. "Hey, Midoriya!" He waved at the green head. "Oh, hello, Kirishima-kun." He gave a sweet smile. "Do you need something?" "Yeah, actually. I was wondering if you know why Bakugo was transferred." Eijiro thought he saw Midoriya smile fall slightly, and a flash of something shot through his eyes. But a second later it was just as bright. Oh. He began fidgeting a little, then continued hastily. "No, sorry. Anyways, if that's all." Yeah?" Eijiro replied, but his friend was already walking away. That was weird. He hates to think that his friend would be lying to him, but that's what it seems like. But Midoriya is not one to hide things from others, so Eiichiro's sure there must be a good reason, or he's overthinking it. But Midoriya is kind of a bad liar. Everyone knows this, so he's going to assume that Midoriya knows something. How he found out, however, is a big question, as well as why he's hiding it. Either Bakugo told him, although they were childhood friends, they're not close now, so this is unlikely. He saw whatever it was happen, or he was a part of it. Though this doesn't make much sense either. If he was part of it, wouldn't he be in trouble as well? And so, Eijiro walks away from lunch with more questions. It was the end of the day, after Aizawa-sensei had left, but the entire class was still around chatting before going home. The majority of the conversations were as expected, about Bakugo's transfer. Eijiro heard a lot of theories going around, but it didn't seem like anyone actually knew. The only group not talking about it was Midoriya's. He could hear them idly chatting about schoolwork while packing up, Ida and Uraraka standing around Midoriya's desk. Eijiro could see them try to saddle Monoma into the conversation, asking polite questions, but the blonde just stood abruptly, snatching his bag and heading towards the door. Right before he walked out, however, he said, offhand to the group, although it was loud enough for the entire class to hear, "You're probably just as bad as Bakugo. I don't want to associate with the friends of a bully." He sneered the last word, and breezed out of the room. It was silent. For about 10 seconds. The room erupted in noise, even more so than the levels of this morning. "Did you hear that? Was he talking about Bakugo? Bakugo, a bully? Is that why he was transferred? That can't be true, right?" Eijiro's mind was reeling. He didn't want to believe that his friend was a bully. Monoma was just picking on him, right? If anything, he's the bully. Sure, Bakugo is brash. He insulted everyone almost constantly, and he's somewhat volatile. He used his quirk to explode things often, but a bully? Eijiro had his fair share of bullies in middle school, people picking on him for his weak quirk. So who can blame him if he doesn't want it to be true? He refocuses on his classmates. Most are still asking questions and denying what Monoma had said. He finds his gaze residing, once again, with Midoriya, who looks like he's trying to disappear into his seat. His shoulders are hunched and his head tucked down. Uraraka has a hand on his shoulder and is asking what's the matter, while Ida has focused on the rest of the class, arm chopping as he tries to rein in the noise. Eijiro watched Uraraka try in vain to get Midoriya to relax. Why is he reacting this way? Is it because he's shocked that someone he's known for so long might be a bully? And why isn't he defending him? If he's known him for so long and they went to middle school together, wouldn't he know the truth? Oh. Eijiro suddenly thinks back to the first day of school, during the quirk apprehension test. Bakugo had almost attacked Midoriya after he used his quirk to throw the ball. And during their first heroics class, Bakugo almost... He specifically went after Midoriya, and hurt him pretty bad. Eijiro always thought it was just their thing, like, because they knew each other, that's what they did. Eijiro stands abruptly, chair screeching as it scoots back when he rises. He doesn't notice how the noise and his sudden movement draw his classmates' attention. He walks to Midoriya, and places a hand on his other shoulder, causing Uraraka to let go and back away from him a little. Midoriya. His friend looks up, albeit rather slowly, and makes eye contact. He worries on his bottom lip. "Yes, Kirishima-kun?" Eijiro almost wants to join in on the fidgeting. He takes a breath and hopes the answer is no. "Did Bakugo bully you?" A sharp intake of breath, and a hesitant but clearly there nod. Then Midoriya stands, grabs his bag, and jets out of the room, not looking at anyone. The door slams shut after him, and the class stares on in shock. The noise from moments before dissipated from that single, nonverbal response. Uraraka looks like she's going to cry or punch someone. Ida has a vacant look on his face, arms moving slightly but without purpose. Todoroki is still, his face blank. Ashido, Kaminari, and Sero all have varying degrees of shock on their faces. The rest of the class either looks sad or angry. It was quiet. It was quiet now that they knew, and what they knew now was obvious in retrospect. Hindsight is always 20/20 after all. It wasn't like either of them actively tried to hide anything. Bakugo always seemed more on edge around Midoriya, like one wrong word from the boy would send him teetering over the sharp edge of the blade into destructive territory. Which happened. Pretty often, actually. And Midoriya just took it. He tried to placate him sometimes, but he never fought back unless it was in training. He just raised his arms in front of his face and took it. Eijiro realized he was still standing, jaw agape, looking at the door Midoriya had just left through. But he couldn't care. Not when his friend? Is it bad to consider Bakugo a friend? Bullied Midoriya. Kind, selfless Midoriya, who would never intentionally hurt anyone, who Bakugo hurt and no one stopped him. Eijiro slid into the seat next to him, Bakugo's old seat, from where he would often turn around to yell at Midoriya or let off a little explosion too, just because he could. Who knows how long Bakugo had been mistreating him. They went to the same middle school. It could have been going on for years for all they knew. The noise picked up again after minutes of quiet, but there was no yelling this time. They were just stuttering questions lined with tones of disbelief and hurt. "Why?" someone asked quietly. "How? Midoriya is really strong. How could Bakugo?" They left the question hanging, but it was a good point. Why did Midoriya just take it if he could fight back with his quirk? And why did Bakugo bully him in the first place? "I believe." Todoroki spoke evenly from his seat in the back of the class, but his tone and left side were traced with frost. "Midoriya's quirk came in late. He mentioned it once in passing." Eijiro puts his head in his hands. Bakugo had a direct opposition to things he considered weak. It's not, and Eijiro hates that he can think this with confidence. It's not strange that he would bully someone without a quirk. He hates that he's not surprised, and he hates that he missed it. He became friends with a bully, not to say people can't change, but he obviously hadn't much, though Eijiro didn't know what he was like before, and he desperately hopes it wasn't worse than picking fights he does now. Eijiro himself was bullied. He couldn't. He shakes his head. There's a lot they still don't know, but he doesn't need to get wrapped up in his own head. He needs to support Midoriya. Of course, he still has questions, as does the rest of his classmates, but no one here can answer them, and it doesn't seem fair to ask. So everyone eventually, slowly files out of the classroom, head scrambling to make purchase with the recent revelations. And they go home. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 7 of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. Chapter 8 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to everything so far, and as always, thank you so much for listening.